Welcome to another episode of Unreleased or Unobtainable, a series where I either look at games that were finished but were never sold for some reason or another, or are extremely expensive because they're rare and were sold in limited quantities. This is achieved through the miracle that is emulation, since a lowly YouTuber like myself cannot afford the thousands of dollars the Unobtainables go for, and because the Unreleased are simply that. Today, we're deep diving into an Unobtainable, Extraterrestrials for the Atari 2600. And no, not that ET. I've already made a video about that rubbish dump smelling curiosity if that's what you're chasing, albeit a long time ago. Sold in the early months of 1984 in very limited quantities, Extraterrestrials has the distinction of being the only official Canadian-made 2600 game. Depending on who you ask, only 5 or 6 copies are thought to exist, making it one of the rarest games on the system. Its existence wasn't even known about, let alone confirmed, until 2011. So, how does such an enigma come about? The story starts with the Personal Computer Museum, which was located in Brantford, Ontario. Towards the end of 2011, the museum's founder and curator, Sid Bolton, received an unusual donation in the form of a 2600 cartridge. With one of the largest collections of games and computers in North America, even Sid had not heard about Extraterrestrials. After not being able to find any information online, it became apparent that he might have something very rare in his possession. So, what's Extraterrestrials about, and what's its story? While no official instruction manuals or box art is thought to exist, figuring out the premise of the game is easy since the gameplay is so simplistic. Extraterrestrials is 2-player only, with one player being the alien, while the other is generally referred to as a ranger. The goal for the ranger is to catch the alien, and while the alien is avoiding capture, its goal is to collect as many points as possible. Once the alien is caught 3 times, it's game over and the score resets. Whatever it is that the alien is collecting will respawn over time. There's also invisible walls for the aliens that the rangers can walk through, but otherwise, that's it. There's not much else going on besides from the fact that there are 4 aliens to choose from, one of which will look quite familiar. Thankfully, unlike previous games I've covered, there isn't too much mystery about the origins of Extraterrestrials. The donator of the original cartridge to the museum was one Peter Banting, who was the producer on the game. He found it while cleaning up one day, and rather than throwing it in the bin, luckily for us, he thought of the Personal Computer Museum, having recently visited with his grandchildren. The story starts with Peter and other members of the Banting family in 1983. Peter's cousin, Tom Banting, was the president of a company called Telcom Research, which specialised in broadcast and telephone equipment. To capitalise on the video game boom that was happening at the time, Skill Screen Games was formed with the existing Telcom Research to be used as a manufacturer. This comprised of Tom as the president, Peter as the producer, and Jay Maitland Banting, who covered artwork and packaging. Herman Quast was brought in as a programmer, and together they started work on a 2600 game with a targeted deadline being the 1983 Christmas season. Some of your ears may have pricked up at the mention of 1983 and can probably guess where this story is heading. Yes, the great video game crash of 1983 happened and directly affected the release of Extraterrestrials. The fact that the development was delayed didn't help things either. They missed their Christmas release window, and the game wasn't completed until early 1984, further exacerbating things. By then, no retailers would accept it, and Skill Screen Games were left with a finished product they could no longer sell. In a desperate bid to recoup the large amount of money that had been invested into the project, the Bantings actually started selling the game door to door in the Hamilton-Burlington areas of Ontario. The creators are unsure exactly how many they sold decades earlier, but is thought to be a few hundred units at most. Regardless, we're quite lucky that a museum came into possession of it first, as it's their initiative to share their find with the world, unlike so many similar games that remain undumped because they only exist in some private collection somewhere. Efforts started immediately to dump and archive the game's ROM, and during their research, the museum reached out to the game's original programmer, Herman Quast, who, incidentally, lived close by. On arriving at the museum, Quast brought with him a welcome surprise: another copy of the game. It was already dismantled because he was having issues getting it to play on his 2600, so an EEPROM programmer was used to dump the ROM. As it turns out, the original copy from Peter Banting was a prototype, being less polished and missing sound compared to the cartridge Quast donated. Initially, the dump ROM didn't play properly in the 2600 emulator, Stellar. The collision was off, which wasn't an issue when playing on real hardware. This turned out to be because of the way the game was programmed, having been reverse engineered from existing 2600 games since there wasn't any official documentation at the time on how to program the platform. The specific issue lay in a register called rsync, just in case you were wondering, but I'm no 2600 programming expert, so I won't even begin to try to explain it. Luckily for us, this issue was directly addressed by Stellar's programmers and was amended in the 3.8.1 release. The ROM was made available for all to play, which is what I'm showing in this video. To celebrate the find, in conjunction with Good Deal Games, the museum sold 100 reproductions, with profits going back into the museum since it was run by volunteers. The package included a box and manual which were made for the project since the originals are not thought to still exist. It also came with a bonus DVD including news coverage of the find since the media did take an interest. The repo cartridges without the box and other extras were sold for a time directly by Good Deal Games too, but appears they have now shut up shop. So, how many of these cartridges exist out there? I've talked about the original 2 donations, but Harmon Quast also owns an additional copy. A 4th copy was then obtained by museum volunteers from Kitchener, Ontario, and a 5th copy is thought to be owned by a woman in Hamilton. She contacted the museum after seeing news coverage, and one of the museum's volunteers, Adam White, had organised to meet with her to authenticate it. This plan fell through, however, and she later stated that she didn't wish to sell it and did not want to be contacted again. In the August of 2018, Atari Age forum goer, Beardman32, claimed he owned an additional copy that he purchased from a retired couple somewhere in Ontario. Whether this is the same copy as the woman's in Hamilton is unknown, but he later claimed to have sold it for $16,500, and for some reason proved it with a photo of the relevant cash in hand. Okay champ. As of recording this video, it appears that same copy is listed on eBay, but for an eye-watering $90,000. Wow, I'll leave it up to you if you think it's truly worth that much. You can tell it's the same cartridge too, because of the location of certain creases on the label. Whether it's being sold by Beardman32 or by whoever supposedly bought it for $16,500 is unknown, but regardless of the drama it caused on Atari Age, it is a potential 6th copy nonetheless. In a sad end to this tale, Sid Bolton suddenly passed away in June 2018 at the age of just 46. He leaves a large legacy in the world of retro gaming history and preservation, including the museum he founded. Unfortunately, the museum is no longer open, and the future of its contents, extraterrestrial cartridges included, is currently unknown. It appears Sid did not wish to sell them during his lifetime, so let's hope they get moved to another museum for us all to enjoy, rather than an anonymous collection. And as for Telcom research, they appear to still exist. At least their website still does. The latest news on the website is dated to 2010, as is the copyright notice. Regardless if they're still going or not, it appears they wish to distance themselves from the game, as it no doubt caused them lots of burden back in the day. For us, it's a cool part of Atari history, but for them, the financial loss probably still stings. Either way, this has been another episode of Unreleased or Unobtainable. If you have any ideas for future episodes, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.